Hello, everyone, and welcome. You're listening to the 888 Align podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Hanna. I'm a serial entrepreneur who likes to immerse into many facets of life, focusing on growth, mindset, healing, and soul alignment. 8 represents strength, prosperity, balance, power, overcoming, stability, and to me, the yin and yang of life. Pain weaves the gratitude for the beauty in life and appreciation for our generational evolution. You're in the right place if you're looking to dive deeper into finding meaning within yourself and your life experiences, work towards transforming into and aligning with your highest version of yourself, take action steps towards building and creating the life of your dreams, as well as explore discussions on health and wellness, balance, self-care, plus areas like travel, fashion, art, culture, manifestation, entrepreneurship, and even a little spirituality. To be 888 aligned means to be aligning to your strongest and most powerful and enlightened version of yourself. To continue to evolve and always be open to growth while staying true to your core values and individuality. Let's get started with this week's alignment. Hello, everyone, and good morning. Welcome back to 888 Aligned. Thank you for taking the time to check out the podcast and tune in as always. And don't forget, I'd love to hear from you guys. So whether you leave a review or message me even on Instagram, don't be afraid to reach out. I'd love to hear some feedback and what you think of the podcast. Okay, so this episode title made me laugh, and maybe it did for you too, but it's really true. My biggest business icks as a woman entrepreneur. And some of it may be niche to the women out there, but certainly not all of it. And as I'm sure anyone listening could find an ick or two in some of the things I'm going to talk about in this episode, you likely, if you are in business or just in any industry, work at all, you may have experienced some of these things. But being a woman in business, no doubt, comes with its own set of icks towards not just the male-dominated space, but also to just not having good character within the business industry or networking or making connections with people. So with that, let's get into today's episode. Okay, so here are some of my biggest icks, and some of them will have their own little story times. Okay, so number 1, acting like you are better than others because you have more money or accomplishments. This goes without saying, but plenty of people I've encountered have chosen to not look my way, shake my hand, or acknowledge my presence if they feel they are in a different tier than me. I really do not care to have a connection with someone like that, so they are truly doing me a favor. I have noticed this whether being a woman or the only woman in the room, or just being someone who maybe they don't know, or being someone in a lower position than who they are looking for. And I have met also plenty of very successful people who are probably more wealthy and successful than those other people that have been humbly happy to speak with anyone that is respectful and kind. So don't make the mistake of thinking that the only rich and successful people out there all operate and act the same way. And so you have to put up with it. You don't, and I personally haven't. And sometimes it has to do with your location or the people surrounding those people, because again, like I said in the other episode, and as we know, it's the people closest to you, the 5 people closest to you kind of make you up, right? But what does that say about business or your industry or where you're working? The community of people, those coworkers, peers, higher ups, they all kind of cultivate an energy of how to act, right? It's the company culture. And sometimes company culture kind of extends itself to company connections, right? So those connections and then connecting to other networks, sometimes they all create a similar culture. Sometimes you just have to get out of that area, out of that company culture, out of that networking space you're in, because there are so many people, again, 8 billion people in the world, that doesn't mean everyone is going to act the same. So don't make the mistake of thinking that only the rich and successful people out there all operate and act the same way. You don't have to put up with it, and I personally haven't. Okay, number 2, getting defensive when someone doesn't want to share all of their private endeavors or business plans with you. Personally, this is a really weird one to me and kind of goes with number 1, but sometimes people who are successful or wealthy think they are just entitled to information. And this is just an assumption, but it's something I've come across, and it's not everyone, but some people. And they get angry when they're not given that information. And it's truly a huge turnoff in business and just a connection. And frankly, again, not someone I care to connect with. So here's a little story time. Just the other day, my business partner was networking at an event and someone asked him a specific question, more about a private part of our business, and he declined to give too much information in detail. He gave a little bit, but not all the details this person wanted. And we had discussed this as a business practice. It's something that we'd like to keep a little more private. And as a result, this person got annoyed, said out loud something along the lines of, "What am I going to steal from you?" And then looked around at the other people in the conversation, repeated it, and then handed my business partner his business card and said, "Just so you know, I'm a big player in your industry." That is such an ick if I ever saw one. Sorry, but never have heard of you and certainly do not need you, and I've gotten along very well without you. That is a power move that some people try to instill fear with. That kind of thing does not work on me and never has. And perhaps because I bootstrapped my own business this whole time, I don't shrink when someone tries to puff up their chest and act like they are bigger. I would rather just walk away and find another connection elsewhere. And there are plenty. There are plenty of other people out there, and you can too. So don't let that intimidate you. Number 3, not upholding verbal contracts because they are quote unquote verbal. Another quick story time. With my first business I was working with a university to design a website for a competition that university was putting on. So the program heads I was working with hired me and my partner to build this site out. And it was a really large website, way larger than the average website. It was about 14 or 15 plus pages at least. And it took a long time. We were communicating with many people because there were so many people that would be included on this website. And there were a lot of approvals that this had to go through. So I would have several meetings with different groups of people. This kind of site I would normally have charged a lot more than my average cost, but I was trying to work with their budget, so I charged substantially less. And one of the contingencies to this was them allowing me to put my business name at the bottom, which I regularly do anyway. Any web designer or developer usually will put it at the bottom. And they even said, "This is what we can pay you, and you can put your business name at the bottom as designed and developed by." And that a lot of eyes of professionals would see it as they came onto the site. So of course, that was said verbally. And we did have a written contract as well, but it wasn't put in the written contract because this was a different conversation on a different time. But I took it seriously as it was essentially collateral and an incentive to take this contract on for less and to do all of this work in a very, very short period of time, by the way. This deadline was very quick, so it had to be done within a few weeks. And of course, I had other contracts as well, so I had to really work very late, work overtime, and put in a lot of work to get this done fast. When I finally finished the website and it finally got all of its approvals and basically everything was done, suddenly we were told we were not allowed to put our name at the bottom of the website anymore, and it would be unprofessional to the university, and it was never in the contract. So when we reiterated, it was said verbally in this meeting we had, they claimed they did not really remember saying that, and it's not going to happen. Needless to say, this was pretty disgusting to do on their part as a university working with newly graduated small business entrepreneurs, and we did not work with them again going forward by choice. Unfortunately, I'd say, don't rely on verbal contracts for serious things, and if you're going to have them, be open to the fact that they may not happen or hold up. So that one was definitely a good learning lesson, and something, though, as well, that is a big turnoff when it comes to those you're working with if they can't hold their word and respect, the conversations that you have and be communicative with it as well. And waiting till the end for us to finish and kind of bust out all of that work and then tell us, "Oh, and again, this thing, though, that we said you can do, never mind," is pretty unprofessional and truly poor character on their part. Number 4, being inconsistent with communication, whether it be through email, phone call, text, if you're doing text, which I like to keep a boundary. I don't really like to text within business, but being inconsistent in general with your wants, follow-ups, and communication when trying to make progress, a deal, or discussing plans for a future project. The same way in dating, just don't ghost. Be upfront and communicate clearly. Also, this tells me a lot of what it would be like to work with you. You know how that saying goes, it's like getting into bed with your business partner, because it really is that personal. You have to have a good relationship with the people you're going to work with, or you're just going to have bad business. And that's truly very true. I have gone through this long enough to know what good and bad business relationships look like and what having a good business partner versus a bad business partner would look like. Okay, so make sure that you are comfortable and happy with who you're going to work with and know them on a personal level as well. You want them to be reliable and trustworthy, communicative, and consistent. If they are not any of those things and you see that right off the bat, I'd say you take that as a sign that if things were to get more serious, then the things you're experiencing would just be exacerbated. The same way in a relationship, the red flags are meant to show you things that you may experience in a relationship. These are the red flags in business partners and connections as well. So get to know them on a personal level, perceive and watch and be aware to how they go about even small menial tasks like getting back to you on something, even whether it's a project you're discussing or anything like that. So be aware to that and know who you're getting into business with before you get into business with them. Number 5, being late. As the old adage goes, time is money, right? Or at least the way I see it, time is value. Don't waste people's time. Again, whether you are less or more successful, treat everyone like they have the right to their own time because they do. And it's truly a big ick if you don't. No one's time is more important, in my opinion, than anyone else's. And this goes even more toward a spiritual standpoint as well. We all die one day. We all have lives to live and time to use up. There could be the CEO of a major corporation. There could be someone else who is a stay-at-home parent. Both of their times are very, very important. They do big things differently. And how they use their time is up to them, right? But their time is important. No one's time should be held more higher up than someone else's just because of the position they're in. And that's just my own personal opinion. Number 6, not assuming women hold high positions in a company or own a company, or assuming anyone's role, frankly, before they tell you it. So another story time. For one of my businesses, we had a pop-up in a mall, and someone came over that was working at a, let's just say, luxury store, and came over to me to ask about our business. And he had said, "So what are you, the creative director or something?" And he's the owner, while pointing at my business partner. And I said, "No, I'm the CEO." Confidently, I might add. And that truly was the first time I was just figuratively slapped in the face, kind of put down in a way where, like, I built this company from my own ideas, and I was a woman standing there explaining the business, and was just assumed that I was just not the owner or in charge. And I know that happens all the time. I know it will happen again in the future. And all I have to say is always confidently stand in your own 2 feet tall and state who you are, what you do, and be proud of it. Number 7, being ageist in any capacity. And specifically for me, acting as though I know less because I was younger, even though the people who were hiring me hired me for a skill they did not know how to do. And the same goes for people when I started a business trying to tell me how to run my business because I was young, even though they never had experience doing it themselves or working in that industry. Often in the beginning, I would take the advice, and it always ended up being the wrong advice. I learned my lesson there. Only take advice from people you are aspiring to be like in that industry who had success. And actually, even then, take it with a grain of salt. Just because it worked out for them that way does not mean it will work out for you that way. I've spoken about this in a different episode, but everyone's journey is going to be different. And sometimes even getting to the same or similar end goal will have a different path. So that's for you to discover while being open and aware of the information presented in front of you like a bunch of resources. Do not just take everything in and absorb it all and assume that this is how it's going to go for you, or this is how you have to do it, and this is the only way to do it. And be wary of advice from people who have never done anything like you're doing, don't have the experience working in what you're doing, and, perceive whether it's out of jealousy or just trying to provide constructive criticism or help, and decide what you're going to do with that information from there. It doesn't mean to be closed off, especially with constructive criticism. Sometimes you're so into something you're working on that you don't see it from a wider outside and pulled back perspective, and sometimes that perspective is helpful to hear. And that doesn't mean that you should never take that in, but just have boundaries and guards up for what you're willing to take and what you're not willing to take. Number 8, trying to pull a power move like saying, "Do you know who I am?" or "Don't you know who you're speaking with?" Or just using any condescending language to make someone feel fearful and small Like you can take away anything from them if they don't abide by what you say or act a certain way or do whatever they want. It's gross, it's childish, it's an ick. Number 9, not acknowledging everyone in the room because you feel you are too important and only care to speak and look at those who you think are running the show or the ones you came to see. First of all, you technically never know who is who until they introduce themselves. Secondly, not having respect for people just because they are not at the tier you are aiming for is truly just low class. Number 10, not being humble and bragging or being unaware. Aside from the obvious of reading the room, anyone bragging about their yachts, private planes, or multiple trips to X, Y, and Z country this year just because they can is just a major turnoff. And sure, if it's part of the conversation because people are curious, maybe you want to hear how people live because you want to aspire to it, and sometimes the only way to know about it is to hear about it from someone living that life, and that's fine. That helps you manifest, that helps you know it's real, that helps you get into a reality that you're trying to match a frequency with, it helps you get to where you want to be, sure. But you'll know when someone is just using these things as bragging rights, and it's just not appropriate, and it's really not warranted, and it's an ick. Number 11, not being open and honest about what you have to offer and promising things that are not true, that you can't accomplish, things that are made up, lies, or fabrications. I've seen this with, unfortunately, a lot of entrepreneurs online and sometimes also just people at events. And this doesn't mean that they are all like this, but certainly there are a lot out there. People falsely advertise all the time. It didn't start online. It started way before this. This happened way before online businesses and marketing ever became a thing. Just make sure you do your due diligence. And don't be this person. Nobody wants to find out eventually that you're lying about the stuff you can accomplish. And then what is the point of that business at the end of the day? It ends up dying off because you really can't provide the results that you promise and withhold what you say you can do. Reviews come in, word of mouth spreads like wildfire, and eventually that will die off and your business will not withhold itself and stay successful. So don't do that to begin with. If you're someone who's struggling to get business and you are trying to provide a product or service, use yourself as an example. Start with yourself and use your results, your personal results, as what your selling point is to get the clients that you want to work with, and then provide those results for them as well. That's how you can start out, and that's how a lot of people start out when they don't have the client base in the beginning. And I'm going to end it off with number 12, and if you guys enjoyed this episode, let me know, and I can do another one on some more. But number 12, being afraid to talk to someone because they are successful or have a higher up position. Again, this goes without saying, if that person, like I said earlier, acts as though they can't give you the time of day, or won't, or if they act as though they can hold you by the balls because they have more power, a lot of times I really don't care to have that connection anyway. However, there have been times where I went to go speak to someone maybe at a networking event and my peers were surprised and almost tried to stop me, like by saying, you can't just walk up to them and say hi. Yes, I can. Introduce yourself, hold your head up high, act respectful to them with their time, and be thoughtful and aware with what you'd like to say or get out of that introduction or conversation. Don't make the conversation a time waster. Think about it ahead of time, prepare what you want to say. But don't stop yourself from speaking to someone seemingly more powerful because they are successful and appear intimidating. It's an ick to think you can't do that. And it's an ick to the people that have also tried to stop me. And it's an ick to the people who are on the other side of it and don't think they can give you the time of day. Don't even waste your time then. All right, I'm going to wrap it up here. I hope that this episode either brought you some value or was entertaining or did both. And I would definitely do another one. There are so many things I could talk about and different experiences I've gone through. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a review. I'd really appreciate that. And don't be afraid to reach out on Instagram and say hey and let me know what you think of the podcast. All right, thanks for listening in to episode 18 and getting into that 88 alignment. Stay tuned for next week's episode. I'll chat with you guys next time. Thank you for listening into the 888 Align podcast. Please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe. I would really appreciate that to help the growth of the podcast. If you want to check out more and join the 888 Align community, you can give the podcast a follow on all social platforms at 888 Aligned Podcast.